been asked if we can record the session, so I just want to check that you're okay with that.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem.
Hopefully I don't say anything rude. But
Thank you.
I've got no problem with that. I just wanted to go through some of the questions that I've been frequently receiving. What I've done is I've looked at the questions, and ones where I've got over 100 of those queries, I've tried to bank them into 10 little sections. The first one is obviously how do I apply, and then Henro will go through that, but it's COVID-19 UIF, one word, COVID-19 UIF at labour.gov.za. The emergency number, I think it might have changed, but it's 012-337-1997. Now, don't hold your breath because they're not answering it, but at least try. There is a number there, and at least try. You won't obviously be able to claim after the lockdown. This is a claim that can only come in during the lockdown. So a lot of people are saying, well, we'll decide afterwards whether we want to claim or not. No, you must claim during the lockdown. Yes, you must be registered with the UIF. You can't claim if you're not registered. There's been a lot of false news about that. If you try and register now, it's not going to help you because you had to be registered before the 15th of March. Where they got that date from, I got no idea, but it's in one of the regulations that you had to be registered before the 15th of March this year. Otherwise, it's no good. They're just going to reject you. I've been telling people register immediately, but if it's after the 15th of March, no good. Informal businesses have been asking me if they weren't registered before, do they have a chance of getting money? Not from this, not from the COVID-19 at labour.gov.za. You're going to have to look to what Henro's telling you, what funds there are over there. But if you are an informal business, forget about it through UIF. It's not going to work. The domestic workers, and there are apparently 1 million domestic workers in South Africa. I didn't know the figure was so high. But for domestic workers, you can claim as long as they were registered before the 15th of March with the UIF. Again, a lot of freelancers have been phoning me and saying they're not registered. Where do they claim? They can't do it through the UIF. You're going to have to look to Henro to answering that one. The department has promised that after the registration, you would get paid within 10 days. That's a promise that was made by the Commissioner, Commissioner Marupeng. I challenged him on it because no one's been paid, and it's been long after 10 days, but he said that's their target. They have now, and I made a video about it last night, and I'll explain a little bit about it, but they're now at least considering talking to the banks, the bargaining councils, the insurance companies. They have not said they're going to talk to SARS. The Democratic Alliance put out a plea to say SARS knows the system, they know how to pay, they know how to receive payment, and quite frankly, they have their systems up and running. And we have suggested, as the Democratic Alliance, that SARS takes us over, and we can't trust the Department of Employment and Labour with the payments timeously. Just remember, folks, they have the money. It's not a point of, there's a lot of false news going around that the Department of Employment and Labour has run out of money. They haven't run out of money. In fact, they haven't paid out any money, but they have 100 billion rand invested for a rainy day, and we're now at the rainy day. So they have that 100 billion rand. With this TERS claim, the TERS claim from the UIF, there is a memorandum of understanding that they're asking you to sign. It's only for companies and employers who have more than 10 employees. If you've got less than 10 employees, you don't need to sign it. If you want more directions, they've suggested go onto the website www.labour.gov, and that will give you better directions. So I thought, let me just start off by answering those 10 questions that I get frequently.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if I can just quickly give a 2-minute rundown of the video that I sent last night. A lot of people haven't received the video, but I know it went viral. Thank you, Henro, for posting it on the SMME website that you've got. The video was that, I don't know if anyone was watching ENCA yesterday afternoon, or I think it was in the afternoon. The Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nkezi, said that he apologizes, but they were expecting 20 to 30,000 applications. And in fact, they've had close on, they think they're going to have close on 1 million applications. And they're not geared to cope with that. They're not going to be able to cope with it. And he's very sorry about it. Now, that's a horrific statement to make. Absolutely awful. When I watched that, I was waiting for the minister to say something like that, because he has to face the Portfolio Committee in Parliament on Wednesday morning, where I'm going to obviously put that question to him. And I think he was trying to clear the ground to show that they're now telling the people the truth. Well, I did say last night on my posting that about 2.5 months ago, at a portfolio meeting with the UIF, I had obviously been watching what was going on in Wuhan in China, and not as suspecting that it was coming to South Africa. None of us expected it then, or very few people expected it in January, that this would hit us so hard like it's hit the world. And I said to the UIF commissioner, what happens if we have the same in Cape Town as they're experiencing in Wuhan? Will you be able to cope with the amount of claims that are coming in? And what happens if it stretches to the entire country? And he said, we'll easily be able to cope with it, no problem. I said, well, can you imagine if we get 1 million claims? Now, I was just picking a figure. I was sucking my thumb. What happens if we get 1 million claim? Will you be able to, in any way, handle that? He said, no problem. We've got the money. We can handle it. We've got the personnel. Now, the Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nkezi, was at the meeting. It was a physical meeting. And he said, I'm making things, unfortunately, sound drastic. And I'm overreacting. And he's not taking any more questions from me. At that point, I obviously tried to speak. I wasn't given further speaking chances. My microphone was muted, but they assured us there would be no problem. And now we have this assurance in our pocket, but it has come to pass that we probably get 1 million claims and they won't be able to handle it. And I think the only answer now is to go to SARS and ask them to do it. So, guys, I just thought I'd start off with that. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm sorry I've taken so much time.
Oh, it's finished. Oh, so it's finished.
Hello.
It's finished.
Henro?
Yes, thank you, everybody. I see there's around about 74 people on this webinar. So, and thank you for availing yourself. It's very important that we talk about today about small businesses. And my role today is to talk about the financial aspect of small businesses in this cumbersome times, and also the permits if you want to be a service provider of essential services. So on Thursday, some of the lockdown regulations was lifted up or eased a bit, and there is the categories of the essential business is roughly categorized into 7 categories. The one is food, of course, so it's all food except cooked food. The big debate over the weekend was about cooked food, but I'm sure the cabinet is sitting this morning and they're going to discuss this dilemma, because there's a lot of gray areas in the cooking food area. But it's all food, animal food, and the chemicals, packaging, and all those resources in the food industry is in that category 1. Category 2 is cleaning and hygienic products. That's, of course, toilet papers, hand sanitizers, chemicals, and the productions thereof. So if you in a business and you think you are part of this cleaning and hygienic products, then you can apply for a permit. I will get to it just now. And then, of course, you can carry on and open your business. The third category is medical. That is medical and hospital supplies, chemicals, packaging, and the production of everything above. The fourth one is then fuel, including coal, wood, and gas. So if you're a small business selling wood, you can open your business after you applied for a permit. The fifth category is basic foods, basic goods. That includes airtime, electricity, and cash, and so on. And then, of course, the big news was the hardware shops can open now, especially those items related to repair services of water, electricity, and essential services. And then the seventh category is motor vehicles, components for motor vehicles undergoing emergency, how to fix, and especially emergency vehicles. So that's the 7 essential categories for business. So now, if you want to open your business and either supply or sell or manufacture one of these categories, you need to apply for a permit. Now, the website address is then Michael, just help me here, bizportal.gov.za, sorry for that, if you're a registered business. Now, the problem is more than a quarter of businesses in South Africa, it could be much more. It's informal businesses, it's sole proprietors and informal businesses. So the problem at the moment is registering those type of businesses that's not registered at CIPC. So I spoke to the minister on Friday morning, and she said they are working on a plan how to issue permits for unregistered businesses. I phoned her that afternoon again, and she said they got a solution, but they need the cabinet to approve it. So most probably after today's sitting, we will know what is the process of getting a permit if you're an essential service provider, according to the regulations, but you're not a registered business with CIPC. So that is that part. Then finance, how the government will, some of the businesses that's in stress and need some relief because of COVID-19. First of all, very important is that you must register your business with the department. Now, that website, you must register your business. I think everybody knows it by now. It's smmesa.gov.za. So that is the first step. Then, of course, then you will go on the website of the Department of Small Business, either small business or CFA or CEDA. Now, small business website address is Department of Small Business Development, is dsbd@gov.za, and CEDA, it's CEDA, SEDA.gov.za, and CFA is CFA.gov.za. You will find all the application forms there. It's quite user-friendly to fill it in. The problem is, again, registered business. If you're not a registered business with CIPC, you need to contact CEDA. You see on their website there is an email address that you can contact them, and then they will help you register your business. And the two most important finances available for businesses via the government is, of course, the cash overheads cost, and the other one is the if your business grow all of a sudden because of the essential services that you must provide, CIFA will also help you with that extension of your business. So that is more or less at the moment. There's a lot of questions waiting, as Michael also explained. The amount of applications is enormous. I mean, by Thursday morning, it was already more than 100,000 applications that the department received. They can't handle it. That's the biggest problem. They're busy sourcing in a private service provider that will help them, and just to go through all the applications. And we must also remember that long before Corona-19, our government is the worst, one of the worst governments when it comes to ease of doing businesses. There's a lot of constraints on small businesses, and we all know them because we are all in the same boat. So, and red tape, of course, is one of the biggest culprits here. And it's not going to be different in your application and in this process of getting relief from the government. Of course, money is coming in through the Solidarity Fund, and hopefully government will be able to help most small businesses. And we're also waiting for some more relief from small businesses to open their doors so that we can start trade again. But as I say, trade, the freedom of trade in South Africa, we are not so free as small businesses. So thank you, Lisa, for allowing me to give that introduction.
Thank you, Michael. And sorry, can everyone except Michael and Henro please mute your mics? I've tried to do it from my side, but there seems to be a slight glitch. So, Michael, thank you. What we're going to do now is just deal with some of the questions that were emailed, that were mentioned last week in the chat, and Michael and Henro will answer them. I have a CC. I am the owner, 100% South African tax compliant, but I have one employee and he is Zimbabwean, which means that my employees are not 70% South African. Can I apply for assistance? Is there a loophole or another fund to turn to?
Thank you, Lisa. I will answer that one. At the moment, the government, most of the criteria for government is 70% of your workforce must be South Africans. So there's no loophole, of course. And the only way she can be helped if she look for the more private companies and banks, go to a bank, because the banks will also help you. But from government, unfortunately, it's part of the categories that they're not going to change it. I already spoke to the DG, and they adamant about it. No, 70%.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just step in over here? They would obviously try and apply for the TERS, because there you can, as long as the Zimbabwean worker has a valid work permit and is registered for UIF before the 15th of March, then at least apply for money for that salary. You'll get something towards that. It's the only hope that you have over there. When they'll pay, well, I'm not so sure. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question from Gary Shawkind, and he's on the group. Where do one-person businesses, such as consultants, go for relief?
As I explained in my introduction, sole proprietors and informal businesses, the department is working on a program to working on a relief scheme for the informal business, and they promise they will announce it last week already. We're still waiting for it, although there is relief for spaza shops and such. But please visit the website of the Department of Small Business, the Department of Small Business Development .gov.za, and there you will see there is a form that you must fill in online, and if you get stuck because of a registration number, you know you on the wrong application form. But at the moment, there's not a formal process for sole proprietors and informal businesses. But this
Another
again,
question.
sorry,
Yeah.
first, if you register with UIF, then of course you can apply via the Department of Labor.
Okay, this is regarding rental. Is there anything one can do regarding rental or getting out of a lease?
Just let me quickly try that myself, because this is not within the expertise of both Henro and I. But yes, there has been a lot of regulations about commercial leases in terms of the government saying that you have payment holidays, etc. And I would suggest that they go into those websites and try and get some commercial advice there. It's got nothing to do with rental for homes and flats, etc. It's just for commercial leases. In terms of getting out of the lease, it depends very much on the lease itself, on the wording of the lease, and that's not up to government. They don't. Just remember that these regulations, and people keep asking me, can the regulations override the law? No, they can't. We are still in a constitutional democracy in South Africa, and I would strongly suggest that if you see a regulation that is breaking the law, then you would then be able to get advice from an attorney. I know that there's an attorney in Johannesburg, Stephen Sachs, S-A-C-H-S, who has got expertise with regard to leases, could probably advise you in Johannesburg. Well, you can contact him from around the country, but I've been contacting him about leases because that's created massive problems, especially for small business. I know his number is 0836. I think just look it up, probably best, Stephen Sachs, S-A-C-H-S. But that Henro and I don't have the expertise on that at all.
Okay, we are looking at finding someone to do a webinar for us on that. So
well, I would
hopefully
just say
we'll
Stephen
get
is
it.
probably the best person for that.
Great, thanks, Michael. What happens if one cannot afford the retrenchment process due to what's going on? Does one have to liquidate?
Yeah, look, this is a problem, and I've been talking to people about this all the time. As I said, the regulations don't suspend the law. Our Labour Relations Act stands firm, and in terms of Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act, you have to go through a consultation process. You then have to pay people their notice pay and 1 week's pay per completed year of service. None of that has been suspended. What is happening, and what we are doing, is that we're doing the consultations over WhatsApp. It's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that. And what we're doing is we're coming to agreement with all the staff that because the company or employer can't afford the severance payment, that there will be an agreement that will be paid over months. It can be paid over up to 12 months, as long as there's an agreement on it. In other words, the whole idea about retrenchment consultations is that you enter into a joint problem-solving process, joint problem-solving process, rather than liquidating the business. The whole idea is to try and keep businesses open post-COVID. And the government is supporting us on this. Just remember also that the judges in the labor court who will eventually have to rule on these issues as to whether the retrenchment was fair or not are going to definitely be taking into account the COVID problems that businesses have been through, and they'll be taking into account the unusual times. Although the law doesn't change, they do take into account the personal circumstances of each person and each business. So it doesn't suspend the law on retrenchment, but you can come to agreement. And you'll find that, well, every single client of mine that has approached me about the retrenchment have actually come to agreements with their staff. A lot of people are retrenching, and I have been suggesting retrenchment because it's easier to get the severance payment through. It comes tax-free, and also the department, the UIF is actually starting to pay the retrenchment UIF payments as opposed to the TERS one. It's a much easier process, and they at least have that running fully and properly. And then you just tell the staff in a back-to-back agreement that as soon as the business comes right, you'll come back. We know that businesses are not going to come right for well, at least this year. I have to tell you that news. It's no good thinking, oh, well, the lockdown's up, my business will come back on stream 100%. It's not true. It's not going to happen like that. Everyone's in the same boat. We're all losing money at a rapid pace, and most small businesses now can't even pay their telephone. Never mind rental. Rental's too big altogether. But so it's not going to just come right, and all your customers are not going to have money either. So we need to go through the retrenchment exercise and try somehow and put something together with your staff with an agreement from them. So hopefully that answers that question. Sorry it was such a mouthful.
Michael or Henro, what about NGOs? Is there any support, financial support or guidance and advice on how NGOs should navigate through this?
Michael,
Well,
do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, just to jump in there, I'm not an expert on NGOs, but I do sit on the board of Epilepsy South Africa. And there we've actually been accessing all sorts of funds because they are an NGO, Epilepsy South Africa, Western Cape. There's a lady there by the name of Wendy Neft, N-E-F-D-T, Wendy Neft, at Epilepsy South Africa. She's become an expert on where you must apply, what help you would get. She knows the individuals and the phone numbers. And I would strongly suggest that people get hold of Epilepsy SA, Western Cape, get hold of Wendy Neff there and ask her to give you some guidance. She's been absolute superb. She's a rock that she's done that. They're out in Athlone and they're doing fantastic work. So I've been putting all my NGO clients onto Wendy, who actually is going to kill me after this. But she has been an absolute rock and is helping NGOs out and giving them the correct guidance as to where to go.
There seems to be quite a few questions trying to understand the difference between UIF and TERS. When should one request the two or either, and actually not really understanding the difference.
Michael, I think it's
Henro, you want to start?
No, you can. I think you are the best to.
Okay, let me explain that, and it's quite a simple. TERS is a separate system that is being handled by UIF using UIF funds, but it is separate for 3 months only, and it is only because of the COVID-19. In other words, you need to show the Department of Employment and Labor that your hardship is because of the lockdown and because of the COVID-19, and that you can't afford to keep paying people. It's created a problem within the business, and then you fill in a separate application. It does not in any way inflict upon the staff's ability to claim UIF at a later stage. In other words, if you've been getting your TERS for 3 months, your payment, and then you get retrenched after this because the business can't cope after the lockdown, it doesn't take away any of your points, your UIF claim and points. UIF is there for pension, for dismissal, for retrenchment, for short off time, all that sort of thing, and it isn't in any way affected by your claim that existed under TERS. They're completely separate claims, although it's handled by the same Department of Employment and Labour, and although it is still under the UIF department, TERS is I almost said a Chinese wall, but there's a wall between TERS and UIF.
Okay. If retrenching staff, can you hire them back on a temporary basis for a month or two whilst going through a business transition phase? And if so, will that complicate the retrenchment process and or their retrenchment UIF claim?
You can. Obviously, as part of the retrenchment process, when you go through the consultation, you specifically tell people that if work becomes available within a 12-month period after being retrenched, we will look to you first before recruiting outsiders to come and work. And yes, if you have work for a month or 2 months and you can show that it is finite work, in other words, you're a building company and you've got a contract now to build a wall and it's going to take you 1 month and you need 3 laborers for it, well, then you can put people on a 1-month contract thereafter. Once they're back on the contract with you, then their payment from the UIF will automatically stop, because then you'll start paying in UIF again. And so you can't claim the UIF payment plus the salary that you're getting from your short-term contract. Please remember that if you employ someone for more than 3 months on a short-term contract and they earn under the threshold I think is still at 17,200, although the minister's using the figure of 17,700, and if they're earning under the threshold and they work for over 4 months, over 4 months, they become permanent employees. Over the 3 months, sorry. They become permanent employees. So be very careful about employing people on short-term contracts, thinking this is a temporary thing. You must look at it very carefully as to why they've been employed. And is it for a finite contract? Or can you not afford longer than that? And you must be able to prove it. And how much they're actually earning. If they're earning over the 17,200, then the problem is not so enormous.
Okay, I'm just going to read this as it's written. I'm not quite clear. So until TERS pays the employee, so until TERS pays, the employee doesn't earn salary if the business stopped operating completely.
Yeah, what's happened is the minister sent out some false statements again on television. Our Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nkezi, bless him, did make something terrible. He made a terrible mistake, and he's driven the unions into a frenzy on this, saying that employers must pay the employees who are at home during lockdown, and then they can get the money from TERS afterwards. Well, that's not correct. If you don't have the money and you can't afford to pay your employees while they're on lockdown and they're not working, then you don't need to pay. Regardless of what the minister said and what the trade unions are saying, we've just seen a latest statement from another trade union this morning saying that you must pay your employees while they're on lockdown and at home, and you can get the money back from TERS or the UIF. That's not correct at all. So please understand that the minister's statement was wrong. I immediately wrote to the minister about that, and I see they've backed slightly off that, saying, well, if you can afford, please pay people while they're at home, which is very different to saying you must pay people. Very different exercise. But thank you for that question. The next one.
Do you have to have a separate bank account for TERS application?
Well, initially the MOU said there must be a separate bank account for the TERS application. They've now backed off on that. I mean, that was ridiculous. I'm not sure where they got that from. It sounds like Alice in Wonderland. But no, you don't have to have a separate bank account. It should be paid into your account. They know your account because you use that to pay your PAYE and your UIF. So they know the account, and to go and force you to open a separate one, I think was just I don't know, they were trying their Alice in Wonderland trick.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just double checking. If someone runs an Airbnb, can she apply for relief?
Yes. Sorry, Michael, if I can answer that one. The relief, she must go to the Department of Tourism's website. The address there is https www.tourism.gov.za. Unfortunately, the fund is directed by BEE principles, but go to the website and you will find all the application forms there.
Can I step in quickly? If you are in the Western Province, it might also be useful to get hold of a fellow at the City Council by the name of James Voss, V-O-S. I can send his email address on to ORT, and they can then distribute to people. James Voss is doing an enormous amount of work for the tourism industry in the Western Province, but I'm only talking Western Province.
Okay, so I think we've covered most of the questions from last week. So I'll just check in with the chat box. Yeah. Oh, can you hear me?
Lisa, can I just, there's a website, I want to just read it, where it's a summary of all the funds available for small businesses. So if I can send it through to you, then you can send it to everybody, but I can try to read it now, if everybody got a pen. It's quite a long address. Is that okay? All right, so it's www.coronavirusmonitor.co.za/news/full list relief funding, how to apply and where, /. But
I'll email everything.
Say again?
I can email everything to everyone afterwards.
All right, I will send you the address. It's quite a comprehensive list. Thank you.
Okay, should I go through some of the questions from today? I'll go back to the top. Okay, so UIF will be paying out 100% of the wage bill or only a percentage? I think you did answer that last time, Michael. Is it just 10%?
Yeah. Let me explain. It's never 100%. First of all, the UIF is different to the TERS, but it's using a very similar formula. TERS, however, is not calculating how long you've been there as an employee, as long as you're registered, but they put the maximum, the ceiling of what their calculation would be worked on. In other words, they're not paying out, but they're using the ceiling of 17,700, and then you're getting approximately 40% of that. So that would be the maximum. If you're only earning 3,500 Rand a month, then you will get your 3,500 Rand. But if you're earning over the 3,500, then you're going to be putting a value on it and using their formula. It's a bit of a complicated formula. I'm not a mathematician. I failed maths at school, so please understand that I'm not giving you the right thing. But ORT would be able to work it out for you. They're the experts in maths.
Okay, then a question from Jackie Benson. Can you please clarify how to apply for certification under the new amended regulations? What portal do we use to access this, and does this allow for staff permits as well?
Yes, no, let me just, I don't know the portal address, maybe Henro knows it, but yes, it's become a lot easier. You do it online. They are granting those permits much quicker and easier now. As long as you're offering a service which falls under the essential services, and they're actually a lot easier on that. I see someone posted it on the bizportal.gov. Thank you for that. Howard, thank you for putting that up. They are, in fact, be giving it out very quickly now, and that's functional. That's working. And also what's interesting is then once you have that permit, you give your staff the permit yourself. In other words, you give them a copy of the permit that you have and a letter from your business on a letterhead and your signature, and you give it to each staff member with their name and ID number, and you give them that with your copy of your permit, which means they then can come to work. So that system is working really well. Well done to government there. At least something works.
Just to come back to the informal businesses, it's still a problem to register for a permit, because you must be a business registered with a CIPC.
Yeah.
So as I already explained, the minister said they're working on a solution, and the cabinet must approve it when they sit, next time they're sitting, and apparently they sit today. But if a small business want to provide this essential services, my proposal will be to print out the government gazette, which lists all those essential services, and keep that in a folder in your car, so that if a policeman stop you and start with an argument, you can tell him you are an informal business or a sole proprietor, and that there's no space for you to register to receive a permit, but here the minister give you permission to operate, and it's in the government gazette for the meantime. But I'm sure by Wednesday, Thursday, we will have a solution for informal businesses.
Correct.
Okay. A question from Jason Rosenstein. How long will UIF TERS pay out for? Is it just for the lockdown period?
TERS is different to UIF, as we discussed earlier, and TERS will only pay out the 3 months. That's beyond the lockdown period. Hopefully we're not going to be locked down for 3 months. Otherwise I'll really go completely cuckoo. But my understanding is they'll pay for 3 months. When you'll actually get it, well, your guess is better than mine. UIF is something very different. If you retrench your staff, they will pay up to 9 months. Again, in terms of their formula. So they've extended that to 9 months. And that's why I like the retrenchment option. A lot of people are very scared about retrenchment because maybe the staff member will then never come back, or the severance payment will be too much of a burden on the business and the staff won't agree to extend the payment over a period of time, etc. But I still like the severance option of retrenchment and actually claiming UIF and not using the TERS fund. Like I said, that seems to almost have collapsed at this stage because although they've got the money, they can't pay it out. They haven't got the systems up and running.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. From Linley James, we have a Zim asylum holder who has lost his passport and has no ID, cannot get registered to receive the TERS benefit like the rest of my staff. Is there anything we can do to assist him? We've had to submit 3 times to UIF because they keep changing the process.
I can't answer that. I don't think there is anything they can do.
Okay. From Susan Smallberger, did you say that the MOA does not need to be signed by companies with less than 10 employees for TERS? When did that change?
That's just changed now with the recent regulations that came out that Henro referred to. If you're under 10, you don't have to fill out the MOU. Not that the MOU was worth anything anyway. It was so badly written.
That's it.
Okay. Is there any assistance to sole proprietors?
Yes and no. As I explained also in my introduction, Small Business Development Department is working on a solution, but please, they must register at smmesa.gov.za, and you will see there's some red stars at each block that you need to fill in. The blocks that without the red star, it's not applicable. You don't have to fill that block in. And so one of the blocks is then, of course, your registration number with CIPC, but that block is not with a red star, so you don't have to fill in that. So first of all, register with you must be registered with the Department of Small Businesses as a business, and then use that email address, that website address that I read out just before. Go through that list and see if there's any possibility that government can help you. But at the moment, it's a problem. We're waiting for a solution.
Okay. A question from Stephen Dell. If you're not registered to pay UIF, can you still receive assistance?
Mike?
Well, you won't receive UIF assistance, that's for sure, but maybe you can find assistance through small business.
Yeah.
So both through the TERS or?
No, not through TERS.
No, not TERS.
No.
And you must also remember, if you're a small business, if you want to claim for relief, you need to be in business before the 29th of February. So you can't start your business now and then claim tomorrow some relief. So you need to, even if you started your business the 20th of February this year, then you can claim for relief. But after 29th of February, you can't.
Okay, a question from Lizanne that I think you have covered. She's saying, is there separate assistance available for sole proprietors in the tourism industry? And I think you did give the email address earlier to contact the Department.
You must go to the tourism website, tourism.gov.za. There's all the application forms and the process is put out there.
And if I can pop in here, if Lizanne is in the Western Province, get hold of James Voss at the City Council, VOS at the City Council. I'm not sure, but maybe you can put up his email address and be able to get hold of him through his email. You can't phone him, but you can get him through the email. He is very active, but it's only Western Province. So Lizanne, try that route as well.
Okay, sorry, next question. I've got a client who's 65 but fully employed. It can now happen that he will be retrenched. Although he is over the retirement age, will the company be obliged to pay notice and severance pay?
Absolutely. Like I said, the law, the Labour Relations Act is not suspended. There's no minister that can suspend any legislation. And they can't now try and pretend to retire him because he's over 65. They have to go through the normal retrenchment exercise, which is done in terms of Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act. The bottom line is he's got to be treated like every other employee. You can't discriminate against age, I'm very pleased to say.
Okay, Charlene Shapiro is asking, how reliable is the news that the Oppenheimer and Rupert funding is on hold? Does that mean all the money has been handed out already?
Yeah, it is reliable news. It's not that it's on hold, that it's oversubscribed. They haven't actually been paying out, or they haven't paid out all the money. It's been oversubscribed. But there are other funds that Henro has referred to. So I think go to that general website that he had referred to, which will be on the ORT. They will be sending it out, and then people can have a look and see what funds they can try and fit in with their business and claim for it.
Okay. And what... close that. So on the tourism front, Shelley Marie is saying they've closed their applications process on the 6th of April. So how can you apply?
I don't know about the closing of the fund because there is still, I actually went in there 2 days ago and you can still go and apply. So it's just the BE directions that's got a bit of a problem. But we must all remember there's thousands and thousands of proposals. I need to work through that proposals first. So it could be a problem, you know, for them just to get their administration in place.
Okay.
I've got a question, Brian, I've got a question that just came directly to me. If your staff were due to be retrenched at the end of April, but now have not worked at all in April because the business was closed, do they still get paid another month's severance pay, May, ? Or would April be considered unpaid leave?
Well, April is considered unpaid leave unless they did have leave owing to them. But you still have to give them the notice, because you can only do the retrenchment in terms of the section of the Labour Relations Act. And only once you have consulted with the staff would you then give them notice. You haven't made a decision unilaterally to retrench your staff. You can't make such a decision. You can only make the decision after consultation, which means they've got to commence the consultation now in April, and then you'd have to give the notice month in May. If May is a lockdown still, I don't believe it will be extended. I'm hoping not. But if May is also still locked down, then obviously you don't need to pay them for their notice pay, because they're not getting paid because they can't produce any work. No work, no pay is still part of our law. But at the moment, people who have not been at work in April, you don't have to pay them. Unless you've promised payment during April, you don't have to pay, because the law says that you don't need to pay for no work.
Okay. Second last question from Lindley James. If we need to renegotiate contracts and remuneration with individual staff in order to reduce costs, can we do this if we are governed by a collective bargaining agreement?
No, unfortunately not. This is a problem with the bargaining councils. I see that clothing has now entered into a special agreement where they have actually changed some of the contracts within the clothing industry. But unfortunately, the bottom line is, if you belong to a bargaining council, you can't negotiate with your staff below the bargaining council's rights. In other words, if the bargaining council has an agreement that says ABC, you can't agree on with your staff afterwards on another set of rules or conditions. That's one of the problems that we've got with bargaining councils and small business.
Okay, and the last question, just because we're coming to the end of our slot as well, is from Dean Sandler. If you have a business that does not employ any permanent staff, so only consultants, can you still apply for alternative relief? Seems most options refer to a percentage of staff being South African.
Henro?
Yeah, that, will you answer that, Mike? Michael?
Yeah, all I can say is that if they're registered with UIF, then you can still claim.
Yeah.
But if they're not registered, then you need to go back to Henro and see if you can get relief for small business.
That's it. Then they must go to the department, the small business department, and ask and apply for the relief fund.
Can I just ask one more question? If we are open for limited hours as an essential service, how do we go about paying the staff for the hours that they work while still maintaining the TERS payout for the next 3 months?
Well, that's a question that hundreds of people are asking. And yes, you still claim from TERS. You have to obviously pay people pro rata for the hours that they have worked. Remember, there's still the Minimum Wage Act that's in place in South Africa. So you can't take people for less than 4 hours per day. You can't be less than 4 hours per day, but if they're only coming in for 4 hours, then you would pay them for those 4 hours on the normal basis that you pay people. It's a simple mathematical calculation to have the payment put in. But that doesn't mean that you won't claim from TERS. You would still claim from TERS for that. And most businesses are doing that. Business all around the board has actually shrunk completely. And people are still bringing in, I've just spoken to people now in a glass business, putting in windows, and they only have work for about 4 hours a day for their staff. So they're bringing them in for the 4 hours, paying them for that 4 hours, and then still claiming the TERS.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we're going to end off here. Just a huge thank you to Henro and Michael for just your very informative chat and being so patient with everybody's queries at this stressful time. We will be sharing this recording, so if you've got colleagues or friends that you want to share this with, that will be probably later today or tomorrow. And we'll also be emailing out those few website details and email addresses that Michael and Henro spoke of a little bit later. So if you're not on our database or you don't ordinarily receive emails from us, please can you email Lisa your email address details? So Lisa, if you can put your email address in the chat, so people can send you their email addresses if they want to be added onto that communication. And yeah, please just in general, in terms of ORT, please keep up to date with all the different talks we're having at the moment, which are all related to assisting small businesses to cope at this time. And if you know, everybody's welcome to join, and you don't have to be an ORT mentor or mentee to participate. So just thanks again to everybody, and yeah, good luck and sending strength.
Thank you.
Great. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much to everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
you, Henro.
Michael. Thank you, Henro.
Yes,
All the
Michael.
best.
Bye. Thanks, Lisa. Bye-bye.